Hello, this is Professor Werwath. I want to talk about a little topic called transitioning energy systems. What I'm really trying to do is understand what has been going on with the energy systems in America over the last, say, 8 or 9 years. So we've got some graphs and some numbers here, but the bottom line is we're trying to understand what is the role of renewables, what is the role of fossil fuels, what's happening in both cases, and what's happening with overall growth. These slides and the data here come from three sources: DW Network, ChatGPT-4, and research from the Lawrence Livermore Laboratories. And you'll see especially the Sankey flowcharts are, courtesy of Lawrence Livermore Labs. So with that, let's get going. So the Sankey flowchart, what is it, right? It's a visual representation that illustrates how energy moves within a system. It shows the stages from energy production to consumption and highlights inefficiencies. Understanding these graphs is fundamental to reshaping energy discussions and rethinking approaches to renewable energy integration. So what it boils down to is this: as energy moves through the system, through the network, energy is lost. It's dissipated into the environment. It is wasted, okay? And you will see quickly how much of it is wasted, and I think you will find it quite shocking. One of the huge opportunities we have, besides transitioning to renewables, is to become much more efficient in our use and distribution of energy. And by that, I mean having less waste, which means we have to produce less to consume the same amount. Here's a Sankey flowchart for 2022. And you can see here that the percentage rejected energy on the far right gray zone here is literally 67.3%. 33% is energy services, right? What are those services? Working backwards, obviously residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation. You can see the relative amounts. There's quite a bit that is transportation related. And where does that energy come from? It comes from petroleum. However, you can see that there's quite a bit that's wasted along the way. If indeed 35.8 quads, and a quad is a quadrillion BTUs, of energy is started from petroleum, what is actually rejected is 21.7, and what is actually absorbed is 5.77. So the bottom line is we are rejecting or losing, dissipating into the environment more energy. We're rejecting more energy on a 2-to-1 ratio compared to what's actually being put into proper use, actual use at the point of use. Okay, so this is just energy delivered to its point of use. This is just energy delivered to its point of use. There is more wasted energy at the point of use, which is a little bit hard to swallow here, right? Electricity, on the other hand, has a lot more interesting sources: solar, nuclear, hydro, wind, geothermal, and yes, quite a bit of natural gas and still some coal. Everyone says electricity comes from coal. Well, yes, that's true, but only about a quarter of it comes from coal. In 2022, out of 37.7 quads, 8.9 is at point of use coal at the generation plant, okay? Far more of it is actually natural gas. So yes, we are still using a lot of fossil fuels to generate electricity, but of the 37.7, I would argue only about 21.4 of that is fossil, which means another 15 or 16 quads are coming from nuclear, hydro, solar, and wind. Okay, so that's the good news. We will be able to compare that to 2014, where very little solar and wind. So both of those were quite small. Nuclear was still pretty strong at about 8.3, and natural gas was also pretty strong. So you can see that what has shifted, and we can look at it by the numbers if you prefer in a table, but in terms of this chart, we're still looking at about 60% rejected energy back in 2014 and a little more than 38% actual delivered energy at the point of use, at the energy service level. So bottom line is we're still wasting, have been wasting for a long time, quite a bit of our energy. In terms of overall growth, I think you saw we had a little over 100 quads in 2022, 98.3 in 2014 in terms of energy use in the US. So a growth of about 2% or two quads from 2014 to 2022. So let's get a little more granular, shall we? I do love spreadsheets. I hope you guys too. I promise you this is my first and last one for this presentation. What has happened across the categories in those 8 years, right? Solar has gone up quite a bit. It used to be 0.4% of our total energy. Now it's close to 2%. So you could argue quadrupled. Yes, quadrupled the penetration of solar. Nuclear, on the other hand, has gone down just a bit, right? So gone from 8.49 to 8.03% of our total, okay? Hydro has gone down slightly, about 10%. So from 2.52 to 2.3. Why would hydro go down? Well, thanks to climate change, right? The hydro is being driven by rivers and streams that generally are starting to dry up, or their velocity is reducing. So the head is being reduced. So as a result, hydro is diminishing, but slowly. Wind, another great news story, similar to solar, going from 1.73 to 3.84. That's virtually 100% growth, right, in the use of wind. So 1.76% is now close to 3.83% of the total. Geothermal is relatively flat at about 0.21%, small amount. Natural gas, on the other hand, has boomed, right? Has gone from 28% to 33%. Now, that's a lot of quads. That's 5.9 quads of additional energy into the system from natural gas. You can call it clean, call it whatever you'd like. It's still a fossil fuel, and it's still very, very destructive to the environment. But we've chosen that over coal. It's been a conscious choice. So while we've increased natural gas dramatically, we have dropped our coal percent and coal dependency quite dramatically from nearly 18 quads to less than 10 quads in 8 years. At this rate, we will probably be using almost no coal at all within a decade. So that would be my prediction. It could be even sooner. And I think, of course, that's a good thing. However, we are still using quite a bit of fossil fuels, as you'll see in a minute. Biomass, we are considering to be a renewable, not a fossil fuel. And it's been somewhat flat in terms of about 4.87% of the total. Petroleum is also relatively flat at about 35.5% of the total. It's still quite a bit of energy coming from petroleum. So bottom line is fossil fuels are down by about 1.09 quads from 2014 to 2022. We're going from 81% to 78.9% of our total energy equation. And then the renewables have gone up about 3.22 quads, meaning that we've overall grown, as you can see here, by about 2 quads. And renewables have overtaken the fossil fuels, replaced the fossil fuels, if you will. Now, is this a transition? People call it that. Some people say it's not a transition. It's a growth. And most of the growth is coming from renewables. But there is a tiny bit, about 1% of the energy that used to come from fossil fuels is now coming from renewables. So I would argue it's a little bit of both. Transition from fossil to renewables, as well as growth. And this growth is expected to explode, especially with the use of all these data centers and all these AI queries that are going to be highly energy intensive, and the electrification of everybody's home. We're going to wind up with using, first of all, a lot more electricity and a lot more renewables as a result. So we talk about primary versus secondary versus final. Primary is the original energy source: coal, oil, wind, solar, that are used for power generation. It's the first stage of energy transformation. So think of it as energy at its source, right? Secondary energy is the conversion of primary energy into a more usable form, like electricity, or gasoline, or diesel fuel, or jet fuel, right? Diesel fuel, jet fuel, gasoline do not come out of the ground naturally, right? They have to be refined. It's a highly energy intensive process. Yes, it takes energy to make energy. That's part of the waste. That's part of the rejected energy equation I mentioned earlier. So secondary energy, think about it, right? Every gallon of gasoline you ever pumped into your car over the years you've been driving, who knows how long, right? Was transported to the gas station by a tanker truck. That tanker truck runs on diesel, so it takes energy to deliver energy. It takes energy to produce the energy. So literally, that gasoline had to be refined from crude oil. So that took a lot of energy as well. And oh, by the way, you had to transport the crude oil to the refinery, right? As well as transporting from the refinery to the distribution center, and then from the DC to your local gas station, right? Final energy is what consumers receive. This is the gasoline that's in your tank. This is the diesel fuel that's in your buddy's truck, right? Useful energy is what is actually utilized for performing work like running appliances or heating homes. The electricity at your socket is final useful energy. Fossil fuel dominance, right? There's a lot of skepticism on renewables. I know the numbers so far don't look that impressive. Small percentage of our total energy use, in fact, it's about 20%, is renewable, right? Critics use this figure to argue against the feasibility of a rapid transition to renewable energy, citing a lack of reliable alternatives and concerns regarding energy supply. In other words, do we have enough energy to even make the renewables, the solar panels, the wind turbines, et cetera, et cetera? It takes energy, it takes materials to even have those materials, right? That's out of scope for this discussion, but I can tell you that it is something that certainly, better minds than mine have been contemplating and trying to calculate. And frankly, 100% renewables may not be possible in our lifetime, or at least within the realm of the materials that we know of. But what's best, or what's better yet, is that it may not be necessary to achieve a decent degree of independence of fossil fuels. We may not need to do a 100% conversion, right? Because we can get a huge impact through efficiencies, which I will show you in a minute. So the flip side, of course, is that fossil fuels represent 80% of total energy needs as of 2024, right? This underscores the challenge faced in transitioning to renewables. It's not going to be easy. We've been at it quite a long time, and here we are, 80% fossil fuel based still. We've already talked about the concept of rejected energy. The portion of energy that's not converted to useful work, right? You saw that in many cases, it's upwards of 2/3 of the energy that we produce winds up being rejected, right? Inefficiencies in energy systems lead to wasted resources. 2/3 of produced energy doesn't fulfill its intended purpose, highlighting inefficiencies, right? And so far, we've been talking about wasted energy, right, getting to its point of use. Again, 67% rejected, 33% useful. The potential, though, is that renewables can, like wind, solar, and hydropower, represent significant opportunities to replace fossil fuels. Their ability to generate energy without combustion leads to less waste and less wasted energy across the system. So less rejected energy, right? Energy efficient solutions, transitioning to energy efficient systems can dramatically reduce overall consumption. This means producing less energy while achieving the same or greater results, right? Cooperative relationships exist between improving efficiency and generating renewable energy. Enhancing efficiency efforts supports renewable integration better. Importance of electrification, right? Switching from fossil fuel applications to electric alternatives minimizes energy losses, enhancing overall system efficiency and sustainability, right? Adopting electric technologies such as heat pumps, inductive electric stoves for your home considerably raises energy efficiency. These systems capitalize on renewable sources and minimize waste, right? Electric appliances generally outperform fossil fuel counterparts, achieving better conversion rates of consumed energy into useful energy. Let's look at one example, cooktops, right? I recently switched to an induction cooktop. Everyone says they're not as fast as gas. Trust me, I can boil water in under 2 minutes, 2 cups of water in under 2 minutes on my inductive stove. Check out your gas stove. How long will it take lukewarm water to boil on your gas stove? 2 minutes for me, plenty fast, much faster than a traditional electric stove. And I would say on par with a gas stove. What's the benefit of going induction? Well, I would say, besides the efficiency, which is noted here, you go from 40% efficient, meaning 60% rejected energy, to 90% efficient with an inductive cooktop, right? It's safer. You can put your hand on it immediately after use because the surface is not hot. It transmits all the energy into the ferromagnetic pan that you're using, right? As a result, it's safer, it's easier to use, it's fast, at least as fast as gas, right? And the other advantage is that there's no combustion gases. What does that mean? If you don't have proper ventilation in your kitchen, and if you're using a gas cooktop, you are inhaling combustion gases. And eventually, or potentially over time, this could be quite damaging to your health. So I would encourage you, if you have a gas stove, to make sure you have proper ventilation to the outside, or switch to induction. That's my recommendation. That's my plea to you on behalf of your own health. Okay, so we've looked at cooktops. Now let's look at vehicles. There's this huge controversy about gasoline vehicles versus EVs, right? We've already determined that about 2/3 of the energy getting to the point of use is wasted, okay? And that's roughly true for both, let's say, electricity and for gasoline, right? Where I know for certain that in actually gasoline, it's probably even less efficient in terms of getting it to the point of use. And electricity is far more efficient. Let's assume that they're the same, okay? Let's just look at the vehicles on an efficiency basis from starting at point of use until that fuel is consumed. All right, so what are we seeing here, right? The majority of energy is lost to engine and driveline inefficiencies in a gasoline car or used to power accessories, resulting, get this, hold your horses here, less than 20% efficient. That's right, gasoline cars are less than 20% efficient. Electric vehicles, approximately 31 to 35% is lost due to inefficiencies. However, most people don't know this, but electric vehicles have regenerative braking. They're recapturing lost energy, right? That otherwise we dissipated as heat. This is why your brake pads last longer on an EV. I've had, 3 EVs in my life since 2013. I have not replaced one brake pad in 11 years of driving EVs, not one brake pad. My daughter's gasoline car, every 30,000 miles, she's getting new brake pads. It's big bucks, a lot of time and energy spent. The electric vehicle is 90% efficient because of recovering of energy or recapturing energy from regenerative braking. So compare 90% efficient to 20% efficient. If all else is equal, right? And trust me, it's not equal. Electric vehicles are a lot of fun to drive, much more fun and much more rewarding, and actually much safer. Not only is it safer in terms of its construction, its agility and ability to get out of situations, its torque is infinite. It just seems like instant torque on demand. It gets you where you want to go, exactly when you want to go there, as opposed to gasoline that has this kind of lag effect. For me, EV every day, right? I'm sold, I'm not going back, right? So this is the energy equation, right? You can choose 20% efficiency, 90% efficiency. We have a need for a transition, right? A transition from fossil fuels to renewable energy is essential for sustainability. This change is a direct response to climate change challenges and resource depletion. Even if it weren't for climate change, we're just running out of cheap oil. We're not running out of oil. We're not running out of natural gas. We're running out of the cheap stuff, the stuff that we can afford, the stuff that we can access, the stuff that's readily accessible without destroying the environment. Integrating renewables alongside energy efficiency practices can dramatically transform energy consumption patterns. This synergy promises lower overall energy demand, even as populations grow. So as our demand grows, right, we do not have to grow our energy systems linearly. And this doesn't even take into account grid storage. So grid storage, whether it's battery or any other form of grid storage, frankly, that could reduce our overall demand as well, in terms of we don't have to produce as much energy to fulfill the demands that we have every day. So what's the call for action? Individuals and organizations prioritize energy efficiency while supporting renewable policies. Every small action counts in the overall transition. Transitioning to renewable energy involves simplifying energy systems, focusing on efficiency, and rethinking energy demands. There is a hope for a sustainable future. And with that, I want to thank you for your time. Hopefully some of this made some sense to you. Take care.